The first time Dr. Arvix saw a human up close, he expected something more. Cautious. Fragile, even. After all, the Terran physiology reports were riddled with notes about soft tissue thresholds, inefficient energy conversion, and stress-induced system failures. The Council had flagged humans as biologically limited but socially cooperative. That usually meant risk-averse. Predictable. Dr. Arvix had worked with over a dozen species in the Interstellar Medical Corps, and humans were scheduled to be his easiest assignment yet. He had taken the post aboard the joint research vessel Varelian for the calm, a study. But within 48 hours of arrival, his expectations were upended by a man named Quentin Knox. It began during a routine field deployment to the uncharted moon of Gelatra 4. The moon's surface was unstable, but initial scans showed localized geothermal anomalies that warranted inspection. Arvix had prepared a conservative team of 3, himself, a logistics drone, and a local guide from the Xari delegation. Then Quentin showed up, backpack slung over one shoulder, chewing on a nutrition bar. "Morning, Doc," Quentin said, flashing a grin that Arvix found mildly unnerving. "Heard you needed a hand planetside." "I did not request human assistance," Arvix replied, antennae twitching with mild irritation. "You were not on the manifest." "Well, the request went through Commander Lena. She figured you might want someone with quick reflexes and lungs that can handle a little sulfur in the air." Arvix tapped his data pad. "Your physiology is not adapted to this planet's atmosphere. You will need a full suit and oxygen recirculator. You are not trained for this terrain." "I've done worse," Quentin said, already strapping on his gear. "Besides, I heard you were short on muscle. I'm just here to carry stuff and stay out of the way." He didn't stay out of the way. The descent shuttle touched down near a ridge where geothermal readings spiked every few minutes. Arvix moved with calculated steps, scanning the terrain. The Xari guide, CERN, floated across the rock with practiced ease. Quentin stumbled slightly on a loose stone, then adjusted his footing and kept going. "Your stability is compromised," Arvix said. "Remain at the rear." "I'm good," Quentin said. "Just needed to get a feel for the ground." They reached the ridge without incident. Arvix deployed a thermal probe while CERN calibrated the seismic reader. Suddenly, the ground gave a low moan and ominous vibration that rose from beneath their feet. "Hold position," Arvix ordered. A crack formed in the rock near them. Gas hissed out, and a panel on the probe sparked. "It's rupturing," CERN said. "We need to back away." Without waiting, Quentin sprinted to the probe. "Knox!" Arvix shouted. "Return immediately." Quentin dropped to one knee beside the probe, twisted the manual override, and yanked out the thermal core. The ground buckled beneath him, and he stumbled backward just as a burst of flame shot from the fissure. Arvix launched forward and caught Quentin by the arm, dragging him away from the collapsing edge. They both landed hard against the rock. "Are you injured?" Arvix asked, scanning him with the med scanner. Quentin winced, holding his shoulder. "Just a nasty bump." "Worth it though, got your car back." "You should not have approached the rupture zone," Arvix said sharply. "That was a calculated risk with insufficient data." "I figured if I waited, it'd be too late," Quentin muttered, sitting up with a pained groan. "Didn't expect the whole ground to lurch like that." Arvix checked the scan again. Quentin's shoulder wasn't dislocated, but the impact had bruised the joint. He'd need rest and monitoring. Back aboard the Varelian, Arvix filed a report noting the humans' reckless disregard for safety protocols and unnecessary endangerment. But privately, he flagged a line in his notes, demonstrated an unusual willingness to accept immediate risk and defensive mission assets. The next week, Quentin volunteered again. This time it was a waterborne organism study on Morris V, a swampy planet with a toxic ecosystem that threatened to collapse under its own biological aggression. Team members were supposed to collect samples from above the waterline using drones. But when a drone malfunctioned mid-retrieval, Quentin was already halfway down the embankment. "Knox," Arvix called through the comms. "You are not cleared for water contact." "I'm staying on the bank," Quentin said, just reaching in. He didn't stay on the bank. A root gave way beneath him, and Quentin fell with a splash into the water. Arvix's heart rate spiked. He initiated a scan, praying there were no punctures in Quentin's hazard suit. "Status," Arvix barked through the mic. "I'm fine," came the coughing reply. "Suits sealed. Samples in hand." Quentin climbed out, dripping and covered in thick green sludge. Arvix moved in with sanitation tools and decontamination spray. "You cannot continue these excursions if you disregard basic safety," Arvix said, disinfecting the suit seals. The next time, bring a longer stick, Quentin replied. There was no sarcasm in his tone, no bravado, just a straightforward suggestion, as if falling into caustic alien mud was just another Tuesday. 2 days later, Quentin developed a rash on his legs. Arvix ordered a biopsy and placed him under observation in the medbay. The human barely flinched when the needle went in. You should report symptoms immediately, Arvix said. I just thought it was heat rash. Didn't want to waste your time? Your time is not more valuable than your health. Quentin shrugged with his good shoulder. That was when Arvix began to revise his report. Humans were not entirely predictable after all. Some of them, at least, did not conform to the Council's assumptions. Over the next month, Quentin kept volunteering. Arvix kept objecting. The pattern repeated. Atmospheric surveys in high-pressure pockets, deep cavern scans with unstable ceilings, a rescue op when a Zillan technician got pinned under a fallen support beam. Each time, Quentin showed up with bruises, minor lacerations, or strained muscles. And each time, he downplayed it. Arvix began insisting on pre-deployment scans, but Quentin always passed. His body was battered, but functionally sound. His mental state, according to psychological assessments, was calm, focused, and goal-oriented. It wasn't until the incident on Dareth 2 that things truly broke. The surface team was studying magnetic anomalies near a fault line. Tectonic shifts had caused a collapse in an adjacent ravine, trapping 2 researchers. The area was unstable. Too unstable for rescue drones. Quentin didn't wait for instructions. He grabbed an anchor line and rappelled down the side of the ravine before anyone could stop him. Arvix's voice cracked over the comms. Knox, return to surface. The readings indicate a secondary collapse is imminent. I see them, Quentin said. They're both conscious. Looks like one has a busted leg. Return immediately. We will deploy a secondary team. There's no time. Document. Arvix watched the monitors helplessly as the ground trembled again. A rock slide started near the upper ridge. Quentin shielded the injured researcher with his body, gritting his teeth as debris struck his back. He got both of them secured and signaled for lift. The winch barely made it through the next tremor. By the time the med team extracted him, Quentin had 3 fractured ribs, a deep laceration on his thigh, and a mild concussion. He didn't argue when Arvix ordered full immobilization. He didn't joke about it. He just lay there in the med bay and asked, "Are the others all right?" "Yes," Arvix said quietly. "Thanks to you." The human closed his eyes, exhausted. Recovery was slow. 6 weeks of monitored healing, physical therapy, and restricted movement. Quentin didn't push it. He followed every instruction, attended every session. He grimaced through the pain, but never complained. One day during therapy, Arvix sat beside him. "I have amended my evaluation," he said. "You do not avoid risk." Quentin exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. That a polite way of calling me a lunatic? No. It is an acknowledgement. You take risks others would not. I do not understand it, but I am beginning to accept it. Sometimes, Quentin said, flexing his fingers around a resistance band, it's not about being brave. It's about knowing what'll happen if you don't act. Arvix tilted his head. You believe inaction is more dangerous? Sometimes, yeah. Especially when people are counting on you. The alien doctor didn't respond. But later, in his private log, he wrote, human resilience is not merely physical. It is a choice. A willingness to suffer consequence for outcome. I must study further. Quentin returned to duty after 9 weeks. Fully cleared, slower than before, but just as determined. Arvix no longer objected when he volunteered. He simply handed him a data pad and said, bring yourself back in one piece. And for once, Quentin nodded. I'll try. The smell of sterilized gauze and damp ozone still clung to the medbay long after the last patient had left. Dim lights hummed overhead, casting pale reflections off the polished diagnostic tables. Dr. Arvix adjusted the environmental settings by a fraction pointless, really, but it gave his hands something to do while he waited. I'm not here for another checkup, came a voice from the entrance. Quentin's gait was uneven as he stepped inside, his right leg favoring the left ever so slightly. Not enough to register alarm, but enough for Arvix to notice. No, Arvix said, but you are overdue for a mobility recalibration. Quentin sat on the edge of the nearest platform and pulled up the hem of his pant leg, revealing the pale indentation left by a compression brace. Feels fine. That is not a functional metric. You want me to limp more dramatically so it meets your expectations? I want you to stop pretending discomfort is irrelevant. I'm not pretending. I just don't let it boss me around. Irrelevant semantics. Quentin leaned back on his palms, letting the silence settle between them. You know, he said after a moment, I think you're starting to enjoy these little chats. I find them instructive. Same thing. Arvix retrieved the neural response scanner and passed it over Quentin's thigh. The display flickered briefly, then confirmed his suspicion, reduced conductivity in the lateral pathway. You have not completed the full range of motion protocol. I did most of it. Not most. Enough to trick the automated sign-off, perhaps, but not sufficient to restore full function. Quentin scratched the back of his neck. It's boring. So was your injury. And yet you committed to that with remarkable enthusiasm. Quentin laughed once, low and short. All right, that was a good one. Arvix set the scanner aside and tapped a sequence on the diagnostic panel. You will remain here for 48 minutes. I am reinitiating the protocol. If you leave before completion, I will report it to Central Command. Snitch. Physician. Quentin sighed and lay back on the table, arms folded behind his head. Fine. But you're keeping me from a riveting hydroponics briefing. I'm sure they'll survive without your commentary. A pause. Then, they probably will. Arvix adjusted the stimulator nodes along Quentin's leg and watched as the muscle twitched involuntarily. The human twitched with it, but didn't flinch or complain. Have you always had such a high tolerance for discomfort? Arvix asked. Had kidney stones once. After that, everything else just felt like background noise. Kidney stones? Little calcium nightmares that shred their way out. Feels like someone's threading barbed wire through your guts. Arvix stared at him. And you survived this? Yeah. Didn't even get a cool scar out of it. Arvix made a note in his data pad. I will need to study the human renal system more closely. Don't say I didn't warn you. The stimulator beeped, indicating phase 1 complete. Arvix adjusted the pulse frequency and began phase 2. You ever been hurt? Quentin asked, not lifting his head. My species does not experience pain in the way yours does. We receive nociceptive signals, but they are categorized rather than felt. Must be nice. Not always. We can misjudge severity. There is no internal urgency. That's what adrenaline's for. Your system floods itself with chemicals during injury. It is fascinating. Highly inefficient, but effective. Yeah, well, we're not built for elegance. Clearly. The table vibrated slightly under the next stimulation wave. Quentin's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. You may vocalize discomfort, Arvix said. I'm all right. You are not. Your heart rate increased by 12 beats per minute. Still within safe range. Barely. Quentin exhaled through his nose. You ever notice how everyone else on the ship treats you like you're carved out of crystal? I mean, no offense, but you're not exactly warm. My demeanor is irrelevant to my function. Yeah, but it's relevant to people. You ever try hanging out in the mess hall when you're off duty? I do not consume solid matter in communal environments. So that's a no. I prefer solitude. Figures. Arvix turned off the stimulator briefly. Your tone indicates dissatisfaction. Not with you. It's weird being surrounded by people who don't bleed the same way. You feel isolated. Not exactly. Just constantly reminded that I'm the only one who might pop a lung if the air pressure drops too fast. That is unlikely aboard this vessel. Tell that to the crew who served on the Sultari drift station. Arvix blinked. I was unaware you had served there. I didn't, but I read the reports. Hull decompression after a micrometeor strike. The non-organics sealed themselves in. The organics didn't make it. That was an unfortunate failure in compartmentalization design. Yeah, unfortunate. The stimulator resumed. Quentin's leg twitched again, more sharply this time. You're compensating, Arvix said, favoring the medial rotation. You'll develop imbalance. You mean I'll walk funny? Yes. Can't have that. The tension in his jaw eased slightly. Arvix watched his face, noting the micro-expressions humans use to mask strain. He still didn't entirely understand them, but he was learning. Why do you persist in field work? Arvix asked after a stretch of silence. You are aware of the risk disparity. I like being useful. There are safer roles. There are also more boring ones. You seek stimulation, even at personal cost. Don't we all? No. Most avoidable costs are, in fact, avoided. Quentin didn't respond to that. The stimulator finished its cycle, and Arvix deactivated it. You will resume the protocol again tomorrow, he said. Same time? Yes. Miss it, and I will activate the medbay override lock. You really know how to make a guy feel welcome. Arvix turned back to his console. You are not unwelcome. You are simply inefficiently reparable. Quentin grinned at that, an expression Arvix had come to associate with mild pleasure or deflection. Thanks, document. I accept your gratitude. As Quentin stood, Arvix watched his balance. Still uneven, but improved. It would hold. Later that evening, Arvix reviewed the day's scans. He paused on Quentin's nerve map, examining the electrical recovery pattern. It was progressing faster than expected. Not by much, but by enough to warrant annotation. He opened a new file, not a medical log, but a personal one. Observation: human Quentin Knox exhibits accelerated neural adaptation post-injury. Possible contributing factors: repeated exposure to minor trauma, psychological emphasis on utility over self-preservation, and an unusual tolerance for systemic stress. Further monitoring required. He paused, then added, personal note: I do not understand his motivations, but I am beginning to recognize their consistency. He closed the file and dimmed the lights. The Mebe, for once, felt less sterile. The hydrothermal bloom on Varelian's lower decks wasn't supposed to happen. The ship's bioprocessing systems were designed to neutralize microbial growth before it reached critical density. But it turned out the newly added food waste from the Xari delegation, rich in trace ammonia and something that translated roughly to volatile root mucus, interacted poorly with the human composting unit, which Quentin had rerouted 2 days earlier to improve power efficiency. Technically, it worked, Quentin said, standing ankle-deep in a frothy, iridescent sludge as pungent steam curled up around his knees. Just didn't think the bacteria would evolve teeth. Dr. Arvix stood at the edge of the containment threshold, arms tucked behind his back, mandibles held tight against the scent. This system is not rated for cross-species decomposition. Neither is my nose, Quentin muttered, thumping the side of the redirected flow valve with a wrench. You got a spare pair of tarsal gloves? This stuff is eating through mine. I warned you against engaging the waistline without full hazard gear. You also warned me against caffeine after surgery. I'm not great at heeding sound advice. Arvix extended a pair of industrial-grade gloves from the containment locker with a sanitized tongue. Do not touch your face. Any mucus contact risks systemic irritation. I wasn't planning to lick it, Quentin said, swapping gloves while balancing on one leg. The containment unit hissed as the pressure equalized. A low gurgling came from the floor drain, followed by a wet pop. Something moved under the surface. That's new, Quentin said, eyes narrowing. Pretty sure I didn't install a sump creature. There's no such function in this deck. The sludge rippled again. A translucent filament rose briefly, then vanished. Arvix tapped a command into his wrist pad. Activating environmental lockdown. Wait, don't seal the doors yet, Quentin said, crouching near a half-submerged console. The central relay's still open. If you cut power while it's mid-cycle, it'll fry the whole feedback grid. Then remove yourself immediately. I can't reach the override from out there. You are surrounded by corrosive biomatter of unknown composition. You're really good at describing my problems without offering solutions. You should not be in there. I'm aware. Arvix hesitated, antennae flicking with indecision. You have 30 seconds. That's generous. 20 now. Quentin plunged his arm into the murky liquid, fingers feeling along the panel edge. He winced as something shifted beneath his palm. Feels like warm yogurt with a grudge. You are nearing your exposure limit. Almost got it. There. Relay disengaged. We're good. He kicked at the drain as he stood, dislodging a chunk of congealed matter. The filament reappeared, but this time it slithered toward the disturbance. Arvix, he said, backing up. There's definitely movement. Exit now. Quentin didn't argue. He vaulted over the containment lip, landing with a squelch on the clean floor beyond. Arvix sealed the bulkhead behind him with a hiss. What the hell did we grow in there? Quentin asked, peeling off his gloves. I will analyze the sample, but it appears to exhibit rudimentary motility. So, a sentient soup. Unlikely, but not impossible. Quentin leaned against the wall, breathing through his mouth. You should probably run a scan on me, in case anything tried to hitch a ride. You may have absorbed trace spores. I will initiate decontamination. Just be gentle. Arvix led him to the secondary med station, the one closer to engineering. It wasn't as well stocked, but it had an isolation shower and a direct feed for full-spectrum pathogen screening. Remove all clothing and enter Chamber 2, Arvix instructed. Not even gonna buy me dinner first? I am not programmed for courtship. Tragedy. Quentin stripped down and stepped into the chamber. Arvix activated the cleansing sequence. Jets of sterilizing vapor swept over the human's body, followed by a UV pulse and an ionized rinse. The display showed minor dermal irritation along the arms and one small abrasion on his left shin. You have an open lesion. Scraped it getting over the valve. Nothing major. You are entering a pattern of accumulating untreated injuries. It's a scrape. Your skin barrier is compromised. Would it make you feel better if I let you put a cartoon bandage on it? I am not interested in emotional appeasement. I am interested in preventing infection. Well, then you're in luck. I've got all my shots. Arvix handed him a sterile dressing and a topical antibiotic. Apply this. Do not reuse the towel. I wasn't planning to. Once dressed, Quentin sat on the edge of the med table, tapping his heel against the frame. You ever wonder why we keep doing this? The maintenance of vital systems is essential to the ship's operation. No, I mean, jumping into messes like that. Risking infection, injury, spontaneous monster emergence. You are the only one who persists in such behavior. Sure, but someone's gotta. You volunteered. Again. I always do. Arvix studied him for a moment. You are not compelled by duty, nor fear, nor social pressure. What is the incentive? Honestly, Quentin leaned forward, elbows on knees. I can't stand sitting around while something's broken. Doesn't matter if it's a waistline or a person. If I think I can help, I go. That is not logical. Nope. That's human. Arvix filed the phrase away for later review. Later that cycle, after the engineering team had neutralized the bloom and confirmed the absence of sentient development, Arvix compiled his final report. He noted the biochemical interaction that had caused the issue, recommended separate composting protocols for multi-species organic waste, and annotated a summary of Quentin's exposure. He paused before closing the document, then added, Subject Knox continues to demonstrate a disregard for personal safety in favor of immediate problem resolution. While this behavior contradicts standard risk models, it appears to be rooted in a stable ethical framework rather than recklessness. His resilience, though biologically limited, is amplified by a persistent sense of obligation. I have revised my assessment accordingly. He saved the file, encrypted it, and leaned back in his chair. The intercom chimed. Hey, Doc, Quentin's voice came through. I fixed the water pressure in your quarters. I did not request that. I know. But your shower was pitiful. A pause. Also, Quentin added, next time you're compiling notes on my tendency to jump into things, maybe include that I also know how to fix a plumbing manifold without causing a sentient fungus. Arvix stared at the speaker. I will consider it. Good. Because I like to think I balance out the chaos with occasional competence. The channel clicked off. Arvix tapped a final line into his personal log. Human adaptability is not merely physical or cognitive. It is emotional. They engage with the world not only through logic, but through an impulse to improve it regardless of reward. This is not easily simulated, nor safely replicated. But it is, undeniably, effective. He closed the log. The medbay was quiet again, but it no longer felt sterile. Not quite. And for once, Arvix did not mind the disruption.